Welcome to our podcast, Between the Fence Posts, where we discuss all things related to agriculture and how they impact our local communities here in East Tennessee. Whether you're a farmer, gardener, or just looking for some updates about the ag world, we're glad you're here with us. Give us a like and subscribe to receive updates for our latest content. Thanks again for being here. Now, let's get into our next episode. Hey everybody, welcome back to Between the Fence Posts. I'm your host, Ryan Brown, and we're going to dive into today's episode, and we're going to talk a lot about cattle genetics, and I have a very special guest with us today, Miss Sarah Orr from Cocke County. Sarah, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us about your background, education, work experience, things like that.
Well, hi everybody. This is my first time on a podcast, so forgive if I sound a little bit strange or funny, but super glad to be here. Very glad that Ryan asked me to come. So a little bit about my background. I grew up on a registered Angus cattle operation over in Greene County. I got my first heifer when I was 4 years old from my grandfather. So I guess you could say cattle are in my DNA from the time I was very young, and it seems to not be going anywhere since then. So definitely tried and true in the cattle business. But like I said, I got my first heifer when I was 4 years old, and the herd has grown from there. Definitely sparked a love for Angus cattle specifically, but cattle as a whole. I showed cattle in Forage and FFA growing up. Went on to college at the University of Tennessee studying animal science. I was on the livestock judging team there. And I guess the claim to fame there is everybody's always looking to get their name called. I got my name called at the North American, and I'm not sure who was more excited about that, me or my father. All I know is my teammate had to push me out of the chair when my name got called because I was too in shock.
Shock and all. That's awesome.
Very, very. So, and to have that happen in performance cattle was pretty special as well.
Especially at the North American. Like, that's top of the top there.
Exactly. That's the cream of the crop. That's where everybody dreams of getting their name called. So I literally, she shoved me out of my seat, was like, go, or I'm going to get your award for you. And I was just like, I don't remember any of it. I was too floored.
Oh, yeah.
But that was pretty exciting. So anywho, graduated with a degree in animal science from UT there in Knoxville, and then stayed and got a master's in reproductive physiology as well. So I guess I'm kind of known as the repro girl now. Shortly after grad school, we started a career with UT Extension there in Cocke County. That was in 2016, and I've been there ever since.
Hard to believe it's been that long, has it?
Yeah, it past 9 years this past April, and I'm like, there's been a lot that's happened in that 9 years. So it's been great, but it's also been like, how in the world did we jam this much life into 9 years?
Amen to that. I mean, it's hard to believe that July this year will be 5 years for me.
No way.
Uh-huh.
No way. You're still new.
I came back in 2020 during the middle of COVID, yeah.
That's why it seems like you haven't been here, because the first year and a half, the world was shut down.
It was just, that whole thing was weird. But yeah, that's awesome.
Something I don't wish to ever live through again.
Let's moving on after that. We'll just leave COVID in the past or whatever.
Definitely.
We were talking about Northeast Beef Expo before we came on here this morning, and my first quote unquote program was the remote Northeast Beef Expo.
Oh, gosh.
And we're sitting in our back conference room here in the Jefferson County office. For those of y'all listening who know where that's at and what it looks like, I had 8 producers total in this room.
Yeah.
It was so weird, and just that was a weird time. I mean, just, yeah.
Same with my master beef. I was like, I don't like this at all. I'm so glad we're past that and we can have programs traditionally like we're used to.
Yes, amen to that. Because there was so much, like you said, we've been through in the last, your career, 9 years now, and then just ever since 2020 and COVID, it changed so much. But how we do programs is still the same to a degree, but it's something I would like to leave in the past as well. I'm right there with you.
Yes.
So, awesome. Well, anyway, for those of y'all who don't know Sarah, she is a wealth of knowledge, and like she mentioned, she is kind of the repro girl when it comes to cattle and reproductive physiology and genetics. And I call Sarah quite often because for those of y'all who listening know that I'm more of an agronomy guy. I do with more plant type stuff, and Sarah is like I said, a wealth of knowledge and always kind of a rock I can lean on when it comes to that type of information. So
it's an equal exchange. I call you for forage stuff. The first time I did a corn plot, I was like, Ryan, I need help.
Well, it's a symbiotic relationship.
There we go.
I'm always glad to work with Sarah, and she's a joy to work with as well. So let's dive in. We're going to hit it right hard from the start here.
Good.
In your opinion, and I know you probably have two opinions on this. We're talking about genetic selection and genetics of cattle overall. People will come up with a laundry list of items that they want, that they're looking for, that they don't want. And depending on the person, you could ask 10 different folks. You'll get 10 different answers, all in different orders. Mm-hmm. And so, in general, let's start there. In general, what are the things that you look for when you're talking about selecting animals for your herd? And if you want to, you can delve into a commercial side. You can go into a registered side. I know that's kind of what you...
You're going to let me nerd out completely?
I wouldn't have asked you to come on the podcast if I didn't want you to nerd out. Just go for
Yes.
it. So let's start the Tennessee bread and butter, general cow-calf commercial production. What are the things that you're looking for overall if you're a commercial producer in our state?
So if I'm a commercial producer looking at selecting animals for my operation, so I'm going to approach this from a replacement heifer standpoint, the things that I'm looking for, first and foremost, and this is going to sound a little bit off the wall, but I promise it'll make sense. Mm-hmm. I want to identify my market. Am I selling at a weekly auction on Saturdays? Am I selling straight off the farm? Am I selling bred heifers, feeder calves? What is my market? And I think that's a point that a lot of producers maybe miss is not the right word, but they don't prioritize it enough. I think we need to figure out what our market is and focus on creating and selecting animals that meet that market, because I think that's how we put the most dollars and cents back into our pockets. So that's the first thing I'm looking for. Past that, I think there's a couple of things that come straight to the top when we're talking about selecting animals, and I think that's soundness and functionality. Okay, you can drive down the road past any farm in East Tennessee and you can see cows of every color, size, shape, make, all the things. And I'm a firm believer that it takes all kinds, but soundness in terms of skeletal make and functionality in terms of rib shape. Can they eat enough? Can they grow enough? I think those two are non-negotiables, as you say, because irrelevant of what your production goals are, cattle have to be sound, they have to be built correctly, and then they have to be able to function in the environment that we're asking them to grow in. And I realize those are kind of vague, and I kind of mean for them to, because, a commercial cow-calf guy, they need sound, functional animals, they need big-bodied, moderate-framed type of critters that can go out and function on grass in East Tennessee with minimal input. Now, a registered guy, we may be looking for something a little bit different. Maybe we're looking for a little more growth, maybe emphasizing fertility, things of that sort. But I think key non-negotiables, figure out what your market is, and then select animals that fit that market. They've got to be sound. They have to be functional for your environment. Past that, I think you can dive into a few more things that get a little more specific to your operation. So I think there are some breed differences, and everybody knows I'm an Angus girl. And I'm going to be honest with you. I had a friend in college, and he's a coworker now too, that gives me a hard time that I'm prejudiced towards Angus. I mean, personally, yes. Professionally, no. A good cow is a good cow.
Right.
Okay? So that's why breed is not anywhere towards the top of the list. And your marketing end goal is. Because if your goal is to market in a weekly auction or a value-added sale in East Tennessee, they almost have to be black-hided.
Right.
To be successful.
Right.
So, I think figuring out the breed that works for your operation and your market is important, but also you've got to be able to look out the window and like what you see, too.
Very true. Very true. I agree with that.
Very true. Can I tell a little short story about that?
Feel free. Please do.
Oh, good. I get to spin yarns, too. So, like I said, avid Angus producer myself, but we had a really good friend right down the road. His name was Ronnie. May he rest in peace. And the man was a dyed-in-the-wool Hereford producer. Okay. Loved those horned Herefords. Kind of got around to polled Herefords later on in his years, but dyed-in-the-wool Hereford producer. And it was strange because you'd think he'd be very anti-Angus. That man could quote more Angus history than I can.
Really?
Yeah. But we asked him one time and said, hey, why in an East Tennessee market where black hides win are you still so focused on Herefords? And he said, you know what? I have to sit on the front porch and look out at that hillside, and something about a red and white cow is very, very pretty to me, and I have to be able to like what I'm looking at. So that's not something that you really discount, but you have to be able to like what you look at.
Right.
Too.
Right.
So, anywho. So what's that bring my list to? Market, soundness, functionality, the breed, and I'm guessing you probably want me to talk about genetics too.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Just a little bit? Okay.
Just a little bit. Go for it.
That's what I say. You're giving me that look like you're missing what I told you to talk about.
No, I'm intently listening. I'll make sure I don't miss anything.
So I think genetics is something that for whatever reason we don't pay enough attention to unless we're on the registered side. This is just my observation in a professional setting and kind of in a civic role. I'm part of the Greene County Angus Association, so I help with those sales. So I see a lot of registered cattle go into commercial operations, and that's important. But I see a lot of guys that still don't quite pay enough attention to genetics, arguably on both sides of commercial and the registered side.
Is there anything specific you're meaning about, like, are they just missing one or two pieces, or is it overall just in general?
On the commercial cow-calf side, I think it's overall.
Okay.
I think as registered producers, we don't do a good enough job explaining what all those numbers are. And how to use them, and I don't know, maybe that's something that we can do a better job of, an extension of explaining those. And I'm not laying blame here, but I also think some of our breed associations have far too many numbers to try to sort through in the first place.
They can be daunting if you don't know what you're looking at. Even if you do know what you're looking at, it's like, wading through a sea of data.
Yes, and I'll pick on the Angus Association for that. I think there's something like 27 traits that they evaluate.
Yep.
And I firmly believe that data is power, but for the love of cheese and crackers, we don't need all of those data points to look at.
Yeah.
So I think that's where our producers, and me included sometimes, kind of get overwhelmed and we just say, you know what, this is a lot, I don't understand, I don't feel confident in making decisions off of this, so let me just throw that out the window and go strictly on phenotype.
Well, and two, correct me if I'm wrong, you mentioned finding your market earlier. Not all of the EPDs or the numbers or the data points out there are necessarily going to be 100% pertinent to maybe your average producer, I guess you say, or your everyday just cow-calf commercial guy.
Yes and no.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. I can see why most people would think that, if you're selling at weaning, you think, I need calving ease.
Yep.
I need reasonable birth weight. I don't say low birth weight anymore.
Okay.
You can ask me that question later if you want.
Nope. No need. I already know what you're going to say. Go for it.
they focus on calving ease, they focus on reasonable birth weight, and they look for high weaning weight, and then they're done, because after that, they're gone.
It's no longer their issue, yeah.
And I think that's where we're missing the mark, because that calf's going on somewhere else.
Right.
I think we've got to be selecting for genetics that benefit all stages of the cattle industry. So we've still got to be thinking about that yearling weight. We've still got to be thinking about those carcass traits. And while our emphasis may be on weaning weight, I don't think we single trait select, and I don't think we neglect those other traits as well. So genetics is one of those things where we could talk for 3 hours and I could completely nerd out on EPDs if you really wanted me to. But like I said, I think producers get overwhelmed by that, and so they kind of wash their hands of it. So, I mean, I guess better to look across all those columns of data, work with your extension agent, work with a producer who understands that, and ask them, okay, I don't want to look at all 27 columns because that's a lot. But if you were picking 5, 10, how do I pay attention to all the things and minimize the columns that I have to look at?
Right, exactly.
So I think that's important too.
Right. And I think I don't remember who was giving this talk, so forgive me, but I heard one geneticist say that you don't, when you're selecting, you don't necessarily want to go way far left, way far right. Kind of like that old saying, you want to keep it between the ditches when you're driving on the road, right?
Exactly.
And so you've got to, you may sacrifice a little bit in one area, but you don't need to sacrifice all of it. And I thought that was a pretty good statement, or an overall perspective of, just because you're selecting for a reasonable weaning weight or a high marbling, whatever it may be, you want to be somewhere kind of in the middle with everything else in perspective.
Correct. I mean, if you focus on super high growth, fertility is going out the window.
Right.
If you focus on high carcass traits, growth generally goes along with that to some extent, but milk and mothering ability and things of that sort, they're counterproductive to each other.
And if you're retaining any heifers, you better pay attention to those numbers for sure. Definitely.
If we're retaining heifers, I'm paying attention to fertility, I'm paying attention to calving ease, I'm paying attention to milk for sure.
Yeah. And then I guess, and again, this is where you can geek out a little bit.
Oh, don't give me that.
Where that individual animal may sacrifice a little bit in the growth category per se, right? Mm-hmm. But you're wanting to retain some heifers from that bloodline. That's where selecting your bulls is kind of a good segue here. Where selecting a bull, he's half of your genetics on your farm. Mm-hmm. And you can not make up ground, but paired with the right companion there in a breeding process, you can get the best of both worlds later on down the road.
Correct.
Without sacrificing one or the other. Am I correct on that? Okay.
Correct. Yeah, the bull is half of the genetic makeup of that calf crop, and that bull is going to impact your herd for many years. I think the research I saw said like the next 7 calf crops or something like that.
Yep.
So, definitely a decision that needs a lot of thought put into it, but one that I think, if we're looking across all of those data columns, we're making balanced decisions, figuring out, this is where I want to be. And I guess maybe I should have led with this. When we're diving into the numbers, work with somebody who kind of understands your operation.
Mm-hmm. That's also a big part of it.
Understands your operation, understands the numbers, and set benchmarks. Mm-hmm. So set your goals. Like, this is what I can work with. So you're making that balanced selection. I mean, That's what we do on our farm. When we're picking out a herd bull to keep or picking out bulls that we're going to use for AI, we sit down and we say, okay, this is the minimum number I'm going to accept on calving ease. These are the minimum numbers on growth. Figuring out what that is before you ever start looking at bulls, before you ever start looking at animals that you would keep in terms of heifers, figuring out this is where I want to be. And you're never going to find an animal that checks all of those boxes exactly, but the more boxes you can check, the better.
Right.
And I will point out that your bulls, like your goal for EPDs on bulls should be different than the goal for females. The bulls should be higher in a lot of things.
Gotcha. Why is that?
Generally speaking, producers are making a single investment in a bull that they're going to use for the next 4 to 5 years. So my thought is get the absolute best that your budget will allow. And it's kind of like you were saying, half the DNA from the bull, half the DNA from the cow. If I get the absolute best bull my money can buy, I can tolerate a cow that maybe doesn't quite measure up completely.
Gotcha. Okay. And that bull ultimately is going to have more impact on the broad scale over that 4 to 5 year period.
Than that
one cow, where as she lives to be 10 years old, she may have, 8 calves in that lifetime? Mm-hmm. Versus a bull can have...
Let's say it's a 25 cow herd. Should have 23 to 25 a year.
Exactly, yeah. Much more of an immediate impact than buying really expensive heifers or retaining high dollar heifers.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, you went ahead and hit number 3 on my list here, what to look for in heifers to retain on your farm. But like you said, looking at a lot of those more maternal traits rather than growth, and you can pair them up with something else you want later on down the road.
And can I add to that a little bit?
Go for it.
Definitely focus on the fertility, probably more so than the full maternal traits in terms of milk.
Expound on what's the difference out there for the folks who don't understand. What's the difference between fertility traits and maternal traits?
Okay. So when I think, and I'm going to use Angus as the base because most common one in East Tennessee and the one that I'm most familiar.
Okay.
So the milk EPD that we see in the Angus breed is the pounds of milk produced by that sire's daughters. Milk is something that we've seen in the Angus breed go really, really high. Numbers in the upper 30s and even 40s when the breed average is like 26, 27. Okay. So we've seen that pendulum swing really high, and now it's coming back down to what I would call a slightly more reasonable level, and maybe even a little too low in some areas. The big thing that I would pay attention to with milk is to have something right in the middle. Okay. I'll use the example of when I'm coaching my livestock judging team on how to read these numbers in a contest. We want milk to be high enough but not too high, low enough but not too low.
Sure.
It's key that it matches the environment. If you're raising heifers or cows on grass and they see a feed bucket maybe once a week on Saturday morning, we don't need cows that are 35, 38 on milk because we can't feed them to their genetic potential.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's why I'm like, milk needs to be average, maybe a little above average, because those cows that are breed average or a little above, maybe 3 points above, those cows are going to do just fine in this environment if we're focusing on a grass-based environment, which most of East Tennessee is. They're going to do just fine on grass. They're going to get rebred because they're not expending all of their nutrients into milking. When we get those really high milk numbers, it's like trying to feed Holsteins on grass. It doesn't work.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
I mean, think about that.
Yeah, it's a good example, yeah.
We can feed a Holstein grass. They're going to milk a whole lot, but they're not going to get pregnant again. So That's where that decision on picking out a replacement heifer with the right amount of milk becomes kind of a boulder rolling down a hill. It picks up lots of other things that can have good or bad impacts on your operation.
Right.
Now, to circle back to the fertility traits.
Okay.
Using Angus as a base again, there's 2 traits there that we would want to look at. That's heifer pregnancy, or HP, and scrotal circumference, which is SC, or you might see it as SCR. And you might be thinking, Sarah, you have lost your mind. Why do I care about scrotal in heifers? It's actually an indicator of puberty. So the higher the scrotal circumference number in a heifer, this is the EPD. I promise there aren't actual scrotums on heifers.
Okay.
I have not lost my mind. I promise it's a real thing. The higher the number, the more likely they are to come into puberty sooner and start cycling sooner, a sign of increased fertility there.
Gotcha. Okay.
Same with the heifer pregnancy. The more likely they are to conceive as a heifer.
Okay.
So if we're keeping replacement heifers, those are 2 numbers that I'm going to pay a lot more attention to than I would if I were selling all of my calves at weaning.
Gotcha. Okay. This is why I have Sarah on. This is why I ask Sarah a lot of questions, because I don't know that kind of stuff.
I told you I could nerd out.
Well, go do all you want to, because that's something that even I didn't know. But that's a good example of, again, going back to your very first point, knowing your market, knowing what your end goals are. If you don't have a certain end goal, there's no reason to put too much emphasis on a certain data point number, EPD, later on down the road when it comes time to make those selections.
Correct. And I think a lot of producers in East Tennessee are doing a little bit of both, which is where my general blanket statement is balanced columns.
Right.
Across all columns. If we are looking at everything, knowing where we want to be for our operation and picking based off that, then if you end up with a calf crop of 25 calves, we'll say, or 24 calves for make it easy math, 12 steer calves, 12 heifer calves, you can decide, am I going to send these heifers down the road, or am I going to keep some of these heifers as replacement heifers based upon the market?
Right.
Not based upon their genetic makeup.
Right. And it kind of goes back to just a general principle that I talk about a lot with Forage, is that, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself into one single thing.
Exactly.
You want to have the maximum flexibility, especially in the cattle world, as small margins as we have. That way you can pivot on a dime and say, okay, I want to send these, I want to grow these out a little bit, stock them for a couple more 100 pounds, or I'm going to send them on at weaning, or keep them through the finishing process. So you kind of can do
correct
whatever you need to, and it just helps you diversify that a little bit if need be.
Correct.
So, okay. See, I'm not too bad about cattle stuff. I'm just not the genetic guru that you might be.
You're learning.
I'm always learning. What do we say? We're lifelong learners in Extension.
Amen. Amen. I learn something new every day. Sometimes it's not always fact-based, though.
Yes, I'm right there with you. You already kind of mentioned some common mistakes you see producers making when it comes to selection. Anything else you want to add on that, whether it's bulls, heifers, whatever it might be, or if we're talking, buying cow-calf pairs at some point in time?
You ask such broad questions. I know.
Do you want me to be more specific?
No.
Okay.
No, because if you get specific, then I can't roam in my answer.
Go for it. See?
Okay.
There's a method to my madness, all right?
Yeah, we'll go with that. So, for those of y'all listening, if you haven't figured it out yet, one of my favorite pastimes is to give Ryan a hard time.
Yes, I borrowed a program from Sarah way back in the day, and she will never let me live it down.
I did not bring that up for the group. You did that. I just said I give you a hard time. You're the one who told on yourself. Anywho, back to the question at hand.
Yeah.
Common mistakes you see producers making when it comes to selection. The most common one I see is I need to expand my herd, so let me keep every heifer I have.
Oh, good one.
No. Just
don't do it.
Just no.
Yeah.
Whether you're a commercial producer and you're going off your own performance records, birth weights, weaning weights, mother's performance, what sire she's out of, that type of thing, or you're a registered producer and you've got access to all of the EPDs and the numbers and the genomics and everything, either way, I need heifers, I want to grow my herd, so I'm keeping everything, arguably one of the biggest mistakes that I see people do.
Why?
Because not every heifer deserves to reproduce. Think about it, though.
That's harsh, but very true. Very true.
I mean, honestly, if you look at a group of weaned calves, let's say you're the perfect example of a producer. You've got a defined calving season. You've weaned all your calves at one time. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's say you have the capacity, the forages and the space and everything to keep all of them. Most people don't, but let's say that you do. Not every single one of them is going to be the best of the best. I mean, they're just not.
Can I make the example or analogy that how small of a percentage of high school athletes go to play Division I on scholarship?
Exactly.
And even smaller percentage of that percent goes on to play professionally.
Exactly.
Okay.
So if that's not a heifer that you would be interested in buying as a replacement,
don't keep her.
If you wouldn't spend money to keep her, don't keep her just because you raised her.
Got it.
Because you've got an equivalent amount of money, quite honestly, invested in her. But the other thing to think about is, do you want more calves like her? Because if you don't want more calves like her, why would you keep her?
Ooh, good point. Good point.
Dropping knowledge. I mean, think about it. And I mean, from a personal standpoint, we've been guilty of that at our operation as well. And I mean, I culled one just this spring that, quite honestly, we did a gate cut and we kept all the heifers. And because at the time we had the grass in the pasture to be able to keep them, she should have never been kept. And she ended up calving, just like she should have, right on time, all the things. The least desirable calf I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, no.
Okay? So, I mean...
And you waited 9 months for that.
Yes. So I have all that time and money and pasture and resources invested into this calf, and this is not a marketable calf. And if I had been paying enough attention, I would have known that before.
Gotcha.
If I had looked really hard at her and went, would I have spent money on her? Like, would I buy her out of a sale? If I wouldn't buy her out of a sale, I probably don't need to keep her.
Right.
So, learned my lesson. This year, we had a group of heifers, only kept half of them, but they were the 6th best based on genetics and phenotype, soundness, and all the things we talked about earlier.
They checked all your boxes that you wanted to check.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So, don't gate cut your heifers. The other one, or anything for that matter, don't keep all of them just because you can.
Yeah.
Other common mistake would be in the instance of like buying bulls, paying absolutely no attention to the number. So I bought them from so-and-so because they're...
And buying them strictly off phenotype. Is that what you're referring to? Okay.
Yes. Buying them strictly off phenotype, or buying them from so-and-so because I've seen their advertisements or I know their farm name.
That's like letting your friend do your homework and you not double checking it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, would you go buy a truck off a car lot sight unseen? I mean, some maybe yes, but this is a sizable investment. I want to know everything I can possibly know about that bull, and I want to buy them from a reliable source. I
may step on some toes interjecting this here, but I'm
probably not mine.
No, but like, well, I don't know if I can say that on the podcast, call out a specific company, but there are businesses out there where you can literally buy cars and they will bring it to your house. Mm-hmm. I'm not doing that. No way, no how. Of course.
Nope. I don't know if the seats are comfy.
Exactly. I want to drive it first. I want to make sure there's no rattle under the hood or anything like that before I sign the dotted line. So same principle there.
Don't buy off reputation. Buy off facts.
Yeah.
Reputation can get you to the farm to look at the bull or get you to the sale. That's fine, but make the decision based upon facts.
Right. All right, we're going to take a quick break. My batteries are running out on the recorder here, so we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with you guys. Thanks so much. And we're back, folks. Sorry about that. Had a little technical difficulty and some batteries running low. But, again, we're here with Miss Sarah Orr from Cocke County. And we've been talking about some mistakes folks have been making during selection and things like that, balancing genotype and numbers, EPDs, with phenotype and pairing those together. I know you're a purebred Angus girl.
No lies to tell.
Let's talk about crossbreeding.
Okay.
If y'all have listened to Dr. Troy Rowan, he is our new geneticist at UT. Dr. Troy is big on crossbreeding. Big on crossbreeding. Like I said, you're an Angus girl, run a registered operation, work with a lot of commercial producers in our profession and personal life. Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts on crossbreeding? I get a lot of folks that are hesitant about it for one reason or another. For an example, I was talking with a guy 2 weeks ago who's got Angus cattle, maybe a little bit of Simmental mixed in, maybe like a Simmental female, but they're all purebred females. Mm-hmm. He's always had purebred Angus bulls. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, I've been thinking about getting a Hereford. That was just what he was anticipating. I'm like, nobody's going to shy away from black baldy calves. No. I mean, they're
absolutely not.
They're best of both worlds, in my opinion, to a certain degree. But can you explain some of the pros and some of the cons? Obviously, the registered folks, this may not be more towards, but your commercial folks definitely can benefit from it, I believe.
If you're a commercial cow-calf producer and you're not taking advantage of crossbreeding, I think you're missing an opportunity to add some dollars to your pocket, personally. Okay. And no, that did not hurt to say, since I'm a registered girly myself. Because, quite honestly, I tell people all the time, a good cow is a good cow, a good bull is a good bull. Right. The ones that live in my house will always be registered black Angus. Mm-hmm. That's fine. But crossbreeding, if you're a commercial cow-calf guy, I think you're missing the boat, because there's tons of research, decades of research, to stand behind the fact that a crossbred calf, as long as it's got a black nose and a predominantly black hide, in East Tennessee markets are going to check the top of the leaderboard every single time, because they're capturing the heterosis value. They're getting extra muscle from both sides. Muscle equates to pounds. So if you're a commercial cow-calf guy and you're not taking advantage of crossbreeding and capturing that extra heterosis, I think that's a potential missed opportunity. Now, if you're a registered guy, I don't feel like crossbreeding could be for you unless it's in a very targeted approach. So I know there are some guys that have, for example, I know a producer in another county who's very world-renowned in a certain breed. You can probably imagine what it is based upon my experiences. Yep. But they have a side project in a different breed. So it's a portion. Really? It's a portion of the operation, but it's not the whole thing. So if you want to experiment and, that particular producer has their own marketing plan for their operation, but if you wanted to experiment, be able to offer some crossbred bulls or something like that, or, maybe a group of crossbred heifers, doing that in a small approach to see how it works for your operation, not necessarily bad. On the flip side of that, if you want to be strictly registered, I think there are some breed associations out there where you can be registered as this breed and this breed and this breed and this breed. And personally, that doesn't sit real well with my heart. Yeah. But that's just...
You're almost spreading yourself thin from a business standpoint, I would imagine, to a certain degree.
Yes, or you're hiding something.
There's that too. Yeah.
Just to be honest with you, because look at it from a buyer standpoint. Right. Depending upon which breed, and I'm not going to throw anybody out there. If you want to know, you can go look that up yourself. But if you come to me buying bull A, and it's from one of those breeds that register percentages.
Okay.
Angus is not one of those.
Okay.
But if it were, and I hand you this registration paper, what's to keep it from being breed B, breed C, and breed D registered? So what is it? You see where I'm coming from there?
I see where you're coming from now. Gotcha. Okay.
So, like, what is it? Which is it?
Right.
So, from that standpoint, that gives me a little bit of heartburn, but that's a very small percentage of the world.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay.
commercial cow-calf, missing the boat if we're not doing crossbreeding. I do think there is a fine line between crossbreeding and what my illustrious father would say, mongrelization. Because,
I can hear him saying that.
yes. So there is a point where you crossbreed too much and you lose the beneficial effects.
Right.
So you do have to manage that. And I don't know, maybe that's what has some producers maybe just a touch bit fearful.
Gotcha. Okay.
But as long as you manage that, you're capturing extra pounds and extra growth. And I think that's nothing that anybody's going to be mad about.
Right. For sure. So, if I'm being honest here, and my great uncle is a cattle producer, he's always been predominantly Angus, but like you mentioned, a good cow is a good cow. Mm-hmm. You know, as long as they're fit and check the boxes as far as overall look, genotype, things like that.
Can they do what you need them to do?
That's exactly right. And for us here in East Tennessee, that's predominantly have a calf every 12 months.
Amen.
And not give us any issues.
And get pregnant again.
And get pregnant again until she breaks even. So, and then
6 years.
Yep, 6 years. If she misses one, what does it go up to? 9, 8, 9?
9, 11, astronomically longer.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
different
don't
topic.
Miss one.
Different topic for a different day on the podcast. But
yeah,
like Sarah said, don't miss a calf crop, especially if she hasn't had 6 yet. So, but it's predominantly Angus. However, and my in-laws,
I do.
Predominantly Angus as well. There, a little bit of Simmental. However, Sarah and I, my wife and I.
Does that get confusing for you sometimes?
It does sometimes because I had this is a side note, but we've got Sarah Orr here across the table from me, who's right next door in Cocke County. Then we had Miss Sarah Vaden, who was our FCS agent, and then I had my own wife, Sarah.
All of which you spell their name correctly with an H.
Yes, all with an H. So whenever I would say Sarah in the past, it's like, okay, which one are we talking about? Oh, okay, got it. So my wife, Sarah, and I have jokingly, but in all seriousness, said this to her. I say if, it's more of a when, because she grew up on a cattle farm as well. When we have cattle of our own.
Are we going to make the crop guy a cow man?
I told her, I said, we can make the genetic decisions, but leave the pasture management to me. I'll figure all that out.
We're going to convert him, friends.
You're working on it.
Yes.
Well,
welcome to the dark side.
Yeah, I know. You're getting there. But I said, honey, if I had to draw it up, then we just put a Hereford bull on Angus cows and have black bodies. No? Maybe?
Are you asking me or her?
I asked her that, and she said, well, I have mixed thoughts about that.
I started to say, that gives me heartburn.
Don't tell Dr. Coley that. Oh, Lordy. But just to kind of see a reaction from her, and she was like, well, why would you want to do that? And I kind of went into some of the different stuff, and she was like, you might just become a cattleman one day. I don't really know about it, but you might just be one. So, yeah.
That might go back to I need to like what I look out the window and see, too.
Yeah, that goes back to, I don't know.
There's something about a girl who was raised in the cattle industry.
Yep. We
all have very strong opinions about what we want to see looking out the window.
My wife is, better not say that. Sarah's are strongly opinionated. I'll say that much.
No, we're strong-willed. We all know she's going to make the decisions, and you're just going to manage the pasture.
That's pretty much what we're getting at anyway. That's the kind of the look I got there. But, yeah. speaking of the multiple Sarahs in my life,
That's a really good segue.
Hey, see, that's how it happens. You just kind of roll with it. Let's transition to a really, really cool project that Sarah and some of our colleagues in East Tennessee have pulled off. And from my understanding, you're going to continue to do this, correctly?
That's the goal.
Okay. So I sent this out via email, and we put it on Facebook back a couple months ago before this event happened. But Sarah and some of our colleagues, like I mentioned, they came out and developed an event field day. What would you call that?
Well, it started as an event because it's not really a field day when it's done in February.
Fair.
Because
That's fair.
You're freezing.
Yeah, true.
And in true fashion, it blizzard.
Oh, that's right, it did.
It came a blizzard literally the day before, so we were all indoors. But it started as an event, and then it kind of became a brand, and I don't know, maybe it's a lifestyle. I don't know. It was way more successful than I ever possibly dreamed.
Yeah.
So.
Well, this event that she's referring to is an event called Ladies Raising Livestock, and I mean, y'all had news stories done. Y'all had some really big time speakers come and speak at this event. Tell our audience a little more about that.
Okay, so Ladies Raising Livestock is kind of, I guess maybe you would say it was my brainchild. It started because I had this harebrained idea, as most of my projects start out that way. But a little bit of background on that. So, been an extension agent for, at that time, 7.5, 8 years. Been in the cattle industry my whole life. Well, obviously, both of those two industries are primarily, hold on, pause that. I got to answer this real quick.
Take a quick time out. We'll be back. Hey, y'all. If you haven't already, give us a like and subscribe to keep up with our latest content. Also, do us a favor and share the show with your family and friends. You can find more episodes of the podcast on YouTube or Spotify at the links in the description below. Thanks again for joining us. Now, let's get back to the episode. All right, folks, we're back. Sorry about that. So Sarah was talking about Ladies Raising Livestock.
Sorry, uninterrupted break. Surely those of y'all who truly farm between fence posts can understand what that's like.
Yes.
Anywho, so Ladies Raising Livestock, kind of a harebrained idea of mine, being female in a predominantly male industry in both my profession and cattle industry, personal life as well, at least in the Southeast. Seems to be a more male-dominated field. I was very accustomed to being the only lady in the room.
Yeah.
At a lot of these events. I mean, Ryan, you're on the Northeast Tennessee Beef Expo planning committee, and until recently, I'm generally one of, if not the only girl in the room. Mm-hmm. And there's quite a few producers out there that are female, and I've kind of felt like that they needed a place to be able to connect and learn in an environment that was a little more welcoming, maybe. Not that our programs in general aren't welcoming, just a little more tailored to our female audience.
That's very fair. Yeah.
So you'll notice if you've seen any of the promotionals for Ladies Raising Livestock, it's pink and turquoise, and I don't know how many questions I fielded before the event. Do I have to put on lipstick to come? Do I have to wear a dress? Is this open for gentlemen? Yes. Be very clear. Guys are welcome. No, you don't have to wear a dress unless that's your prerogative, but I reserve the right to make fun of you if you do. Okay? All are welcome, but just know there's going to be pink, and there's going to be turquoise, and there's probably going to be a lot of estrogen in the room. And there was.
And that's what it was for.
Exactly. So, anywho, came up with this idea. I guess I do my best planning late at night, either sitting on my porch or laying in bed. It's when inspiration tends to strike. So I just like brain dumped all the notes that I had, and then I called Jessica. So Jessica Smith, she's the ag agent in Roane County and a girl that I do a lot of programming with. I called her and I said, okay, so I'm going to throw this idea at you, and I feel like it's very harebrained and a very wild idea, but I feel like it could be great, and I kind of want you to partner with me on it, and if it's terrible, I need you to tell me. So I just brain dumped all this stuff on her, and she was like, this is great. We're doing it. Whose car are we taking? Like, it was definitely one of those minutes. And I was like, gosh.
Yeah, it was almost like, hey, I need help burying a body. All right, let's go. Where are we going? Yeah.
Exactly. That was exactly the mindset. Like, whose car are we taking?
Yeah.
Do I need to bring a shovel? Type of situation.
Oh, geez.
And I was like, okay, here we go. And then so we roped in Alyssa Large out of Cocke County. She's a young female ag agent up here in Upper East Tennessee. And then Jenny Goodrich out of Morgan County. And kind of Ladies Raising Livestock was born. So that's kind of our core four. We had our event back in February 21st. And we did a full court press on advertising. Like,
yeah, you did.
Yes,
you did.
We tried to like put it in your face everywhere you turned. And I guess our biggest draw was we had the fancy lady cowgirl, Courtney DeHoff, as our keynote guest speaker, and she was phenomenal. All of the feedback from the day, despite the snow, because legit we got like 6 inches of snow and ice the day before. I
remember that. Yeah.
It was a situation of, oh gosh, I really don't want to have to postpone the very first one of these, especially when we have a keynote speaker coming from Texas. So, we've got to figure out how to pull this off. And it ended up working great. The energy in the room was phenomenal. We had over 85 people there.
I was going to say, it was close to 100, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
We had 85 registered participants, and then we had trade show vendors and things of that sort. So I think our final count for people that technically attended the conference was like 120, somewhere around there. Yeah. I would have been happy if we'd had 20 people.
Right.
Okay. So, like, when this thing first started, I was like, if we have 10, I'll be happy. And then we hit 10, and I was like, okay, if we have 25, I'll be happy. And then it was, okay, if we hit 50, I'll be happy. And then I was like, I don't care. This is a success. This is a dream come true. This is awesome.
Your benchmark kept getting moved and moved and moved and higher and higher.
Yes. So we very quickly figured out that next year we're going to have to adapt our schedule a little bit and our layout a little bit because we filled up our room pretty quickly. So
I would say that's a success to start out. Yeah, for sure.
We were very pleased. So it was more than we could have ever imagined. We launched the official Ladies Raising Livestock brand at the event. So we have a Facebook page. Can I plug it?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
So the Ladies Raising Livestock Facebook page is out there. We also have an Instagram that you can follow. It's just Ladies Raising Livestock. You'll know it's us because of the traditional pink and turquoise logo. We've tried to plaster that everywhere.
We'll put links in the description for those y'all listening out there so you can go and give it a like.
Perfect.
Follow along.
We'd love to have you join us next year and follow along. We are working on a website as we speak, but marketing and communication works at a different time pace than we do.
Yes.
You're familiar with that, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So the website is coming. It's not ready yet, but it's coming. And then we also have another special surprise in the works that y'all will have to follow along to be able to figure out what that is. But our next big event, of course, is going to be the Ladies Raising Livestock Conference in 2026. It'll be the third Friday. I think it's February.
Yeah, I was going to say, give me the date for that.
February. Hold on. I got to pull that up real quick. February 20th. February 20th, 2026 will be our next Ladies Raising Livestock event. We do have our keynote speaker booked for that already. It's Coach, I always say her name wrong, Coach Cocke Coach Kaya. You can find her online as well.
Okay.
She came highly recommended from Courtney last year. We've met with her. We like her.
Okay.
Think she's definitely going to propel the same kind of energy that we're going for.
Good.
So keynote speaker is booked. We are working on the rest of the schedule, and that'll come out later this fall.
Have y'all decided location?
Tentatively, we're going to be at the Clyde Austin 4-H Center. So tentatively, we're going to be in the same place that we were last year. But again, all of the officials for that will come out later this fall.
Gotcha. Okay.
So for now, save the date.
Okay. Save
and
the date.
follow along for our special upcoming surprise.
February 20th, 2026. Y'all heard it here first.
Be there or be square.
The Ladies Raising Livestock Conference will be in Upper East Tennessee somewhere on February 20th, 2026. So,
and all are welcome. No lipstick or tutus required.
Okay. Sounds good. That's something I would love to bring my daughter to eventually at some point in time. She's a little young for that right now, being 3 years old. But
hey, we had a toddler there last year.
Seriously?
Yes.
Well, if you have cows there, like live animals, she's all about it. She's there.
Well, I can make sure she has a squishy cow. How's that?
Even better.
Okay.
Something she can take home with her. That's
there
good.
you go.
And we didn't really have this on our list of questions or things to talk about, but do you have any updates for Northeast Beef Expo?
We are working on the schedule for Northeast Tennessee Beef Expo. The dates for it will be October the 16th. That will be Northeast Tennessee Beef Expo. It will be at the Clyde Austin 4-H Center in Greenville. Those of you that attended last year, we are revamping the schedule and the way that we rotate through classes. Or through the sessions, I should say. So the schedule is going to look a little bit different, but we've got a jam-packed, highly educational, very diversified schedule for this year. In previous years, we've been a little forage heavy or a little cattle heavy, and I mean it is a cattle expo, but we're a little more diversified this year than we have been in the past. So
Right.
I think that's good.
Right.
Look for that flyer and registration coming out later this summer for that.
Okay. Sounds good. I know we always have at least 7 or 8 folks from Jefferson County that make their way up there for the one-day event, the expo itself, or follow up for the Master Beef opportunity as well. So that's another thing that we always get questions on. When are opportunities to get Master Beef certification for ag enhancement a lot of times in our predominantly cattle production areas, and Northeast Beef Expo is a great way to do that if you can afford to take a couple days off work. If you're working full-time still, it's a great event. Learn a lot, get to see a lot of people, meet a lot of experts in the industry. So be sure to
phenomenal trade show.
Yes, really good trade show. We can't give Blake all the credit for that though.
I wasn't going to.
Okay, good.
It's the vendors.
I give him a hard time.
I didn't do that. That was all you.
I'm digging myself a hole today.
You are.
Just more and more.
You are.
This is rough. I just need to hush. Okay. Well, we're going on about an hour, I think.
Oh,
Anything
good Lord,
else?
I talk too much.
Do what?
I said, oh, good Lord, I talk too much.
No, that's what it's for. It's the reason. I think people would rather listen to a podcast for an hour rather than read a newsletter a lot of times. So.
Yeah, that's probably true.
So, I mean, we try to provide comedic entertainment. I need to have John Goddard and Neil Denton on here one day for some story time.
Oh, heavens. Oh, heavens.
So,
hey, that brings up a new idea.
yes.
Most ridiculous extension stories. That would be entertaining.
Yes.
The stuff that they would put in their book.
Yes. The problem with a lot of that, though, could be,
You'd have to make them
we
be
put
PG.
it on air? Yeah. Can we be, can we be 100% honest in all of those stories, or we would have to protect the names of the
Oh, yeah. Names
guilty.
and locations are changed for the innocent.
Yeah. Oh, Lordy. So, God, now you got me off track. I'm thinking of stories from my short past here. I bet your dad could tell some stories too.
Yes, he could. Yes, he could. I think every extension agent has a few of those.
Yes, and the funniest one it was my very first farm visit, and I can't say it on air. I can't say it on air.
Well, now you're going to tease them. They're going to stop by and want to hear it.
All the more reason to stop by the extension office.
There you
Y'all
go.
come down
see
here.
it.
Yeah, come see me. Anything else you have announcements for? Any plugs you want to make before we wrap up here?
One last thing that I would like to plug, if you're okay with that, Ryan. You say you're the forage guy and I'm the beef cattle girl. So
I'm not going to claim I'm a beef guy for sure.
There are a handful more beef cattle programs coming up in East Tennessee later throughout this summer. The agent in Greene County, aka my father, and I have partnered on some programs. So we are having a calving and repro short course. There's a shoot side health clinic, the brood cow edition. There's a genetics course for selecting your next herd bull, and there's also a freezer beef institute, all in the rest of calendar year 2025. I couldn't tell you all those dates to save my life. But they are all posted on our website, on my county website, cocke.tennessee.edu. So those are open to anyone who wants to attend.
Okay. Well, I'll be sure to put those on the description, make sure they get the link and get all that info if they're wanting that. That's good stuff. Yeah. Sarah and Milton are both a wealth of knowledge, and like she mentioned, cattle runs literally in their blood, so they're good resources. Two folks that I particularly lean on for a lot of advice and a lot of questions, and I may not be able to fill right away. So, but you got anything else?
I think that's it. Thank you for having me. This has been a blast.
Anytime. Well, I look forward to doing it again someday. And for those of y'all out there who've listened, thank you so much for joining us. Give us a like, subscribe, share the podcast. That's how we grow. And if you got something out of the show here today, please share it with your family, friends, whoever it might be. And we thank you again for joining us. And we'll see you back next time on Between the Fence Posts. See y'all.